What does it mean to be feminine? And who gets to decide? Effeminacy is a playful, sharp, and thought provoking performance that flips expectations about gender, bodies, and identity. During their stop in Delhi for the show's first ever India tour, we sat down with the cast and crew to dive into the making of the show, the humor and heart behind it, the challenges of redefining femininity, and the stories that shaped it. Are we rolling?
Yes, we're rolling.
Okay. How wonderful. um, I'll start by apologizing for the delay and thanking you for being so accommodating, so patient, and then welcome you to the space again. It's such a pleasure to have all of you here with us at Oddbird. Before we start, this is another welcome back to our YouTube channel where we try and sit down with artists, talk to them about what their creative process might be. Welcome back to our YouTube channel, where we try and sit down with artists, see what their creative processes might be, what inspired them to do work, and what their challenges have been like in creating their pieces of art. Today we are here with the cast and crew of Effeminacy, which is a documentary dance performance. We have with us Marcel, Diya, Chris, Tommy, and the wonderful Shilok. Welcome back to Oddbird once again, all of you. And I would like to start with what the show has been like for you here. I understand this is a trio version. It's a new thing that you're working with. So what have the shows that have already happened been like, and what were the last two nights like here with us?
Maybe I can say that compared to Bangalore, it's a much more intimate space here. And the first night, I was still a bit unsure, like what's the right measure? How much should we project? Because we were so close to the audience. And also it was not such a big crowd. But then last night, it already felt much more like, okay, I know now what to do. And I really felt the audience. And it was actually a wonderful show last night. I felt very connected and very warm responses. Yeah. So, and a beautiful, I think also the technique was we had much better quality beamer, projector, and the lights were much better than Bangalore.
Yeah.
So we felt, wow, it's great to be here in Delhi in such a beautiful little theater.
Yeah, I feel like because of, I live for intimate and immersive work. I really value that. So I've also learned that audiences are obviously different in different spaces. Just the zeitgeist in the room is different, like between Bangalore and Delhi and Kolkata and whatever. And so when you're doing intimate work, you obviously are trying to remember your lines and your moves and your cues, as is the case. But you're really working the audience in the sense of it's a really live interaction. And I actually really love that. So it's an added challenge, but also an added like charge of energy. So I loved that about performing here. It's really, for the kind of work I like, it's really perfect in terms of how much you have to project, how much you can let people in, how real you can be. The audience we had in Bangalore was like a bigger audience, and also I think was more loud and reactive, which is always fun. But because this audience is so intimate, you can really see the tiniest responses. And I've learned also that just because an audience is not like guffawing and high-fiving, it doesn't mean they're not with you. And so even the first show, though they were a much quieter audience than the second show, it was very clear that, okay, they're really with us and they are going on the journey and they're having... I quite like actually when people aren't always at the edge of their seat, but are like sometimes somewhere else because they've revisited something in their life. And I felt like that was happening a little bit yesterday and day before. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it, zeitgeist, I think, very, very apt. And I was wondering, and we've had a lot of discussion about this off camera, of course, But have any audience reactions through the course of this performance stood out to you? I mean, it goes back a couple of years, pre-pandemic, but something that the audience did or said or reacted that really stays with you during the show, not after.
Oh, yes, for me, I think in my solo, I asked this question, where do you feel her? Where do you feel your woman? Yesterday, there was this man, and then he said that I feel her in my heart, and he touched his heart. It was so
Oh.
beautiful to
Yeah.
just witness that. Like, when someone who is so elderly person is like responding to it, because most of the times when I ask this question, people do not have answers or they hesitate to answer this question. And I could also see him so close. He was just right in front of me. I think it was most beautiful response I've ever got for this question I've asked for the audience. So
And he
yeah.
was also older,
Yeah.
like an elderly gentleman. And after he said it, he looked at his, I think, who was his partner, a woman next to him. He said it, he said my heart, and then he looked at her. It was like quite lovely.
Yeah, it was so beautiful.
And to take a totally different example, I remember one thing, and that was at the very beginning. So it's really 7 years ago, 6.5, no, it's almost 7 years ago. That was in the very first shows we presented in Bern. There, and that was also something which would be only possible in a completely different space than this one, because that was a hall in Bern. We presented only twice, and it was sold out, I think. And there's about 300 seats or something, definitely more than 250. And that was right after Smiley's solo with the Scars, which of course was live in Switzerland. When the stage lights up in 1 second, you have the loud music, and they come with their wild choreography of like, I'm putting up with this every day. I fall down, I stand up, but I'm carrying this with pride, let's say, in this abrupt change between presenting your vulnerability with strength, but still like very heavy, dark moment, going to this light choreography. The audience completely understood this change in the dynamic of the piece, and they were just cheering out like loud, like with the dancers doing this on stage, dancing kind of wild and expressive. And that was, for me, it was the most vocal, loudest reaction we've had in the piece in the whole time. And it was right at the beginning once. That's something I remember. And I think it's a nice contrast to like what we experienced yesterday with the heart and something else, which this show was delivering us.
I also think that people, they also always follow to this piece. In Switzerland or here, they
Yeah.
don't go away, or they lose the contact. It's always there here.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
And in Bangalore, I think when we're performing it with this tour, there's this line with our second performance when we said, yes, this is our choreography. And
They said
then
it clap.
they were like clapping, and they were like, yes, yes, yes. And then we never got that response to that line so far, like, with all so many performances we have done so far. And I was like, wow, this is also a very powerful line.
I think once we did, because Smiley, you remember when Smiley was still there, she was always screaming like, it's our choreography. And then she got laughs for that. And I think sometimes there was also a bit of cheering there,
Yeah.
but it was not clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one moment in Geneva when a man in his 50s or 60s maybe came with his daughter, or maybe even both of his daughters. And after the show, he just came up to us and he said, oh, he was so touched. And also his daughters were touched and moved. And he was really impressed by the courage and by hearing all the stories. And he said, now I can see life through the eyes of my daughter, or I can understand better how my daughter's experience.
Yeah. And I remember, I'm not sure if it's the same father-daughter duo or another, but there was also in Geneva, post the show, like in this artist discussion sort of thing, which I think speaks to the intersectionality of the sort of gender investigation, is that there was this man, and I have a feeling it's the same person. He also said that it took him first 15-20 minutes, he was really like this because he realized that there's a big part of him that actually is sort of quite racist. And he was made to confront that in the piece and then move towards the more personal aspect of like his own daughter or whatever. But it was a big shift for him, and we remember being like, wow, quite moved by that. For me, these shows, it was very lovely to have a lot of dancers from Delhi. I get very sentimental when my community shows up. There's like 2.5 contemporary dancers in this country anyway. So it's very nice when we kind of show up for each other. So it moved me a lot. But there was one, normally because the gender question and the effeminacy question is so big and so obvious, I never got this response, but there was a young dancer who came up to me and was responding to the dance journey that I share, and how she's had a similar one apparently, and so she was really connecting with that, and that was like, oh wow, I sometimes even forget that is something that which was nice actually to hear that. Mm-hmm.
What I like about the space is also that the sound is like very, very dry. So there's hardly any echo, and this is just a really nice change for one. So I think it's very nice, and still it's a high space, and there's like, it's very particular, and there's also air between, the audience is close, but then there's air kind of above the heads and between heads and ceiling. It's very special. You don't get that very often. I think the light was not so easy because it was high for you, or it was a bit different. So
yes, it was very
steep down. Yeah.
But
Maybe
I think it works very well here.
One of the favorite things that I like watching here, one of my favorite things to see, and I say this every opportunity I get, is dance. Because growing up in Delhi, you don't really get to access dance in spaces that are not a proscenium. And I think that distance between the stage and the audience, it can make you feel very small. And to me, that doesn't work because so much of dance is about an embodiment. And being here, watching dance in this space, really changed that for me. I was able to connect with it in such a different manner. And it kind of makes you feel like, oh, this is what it's meant to be.
Absolutely.
And it's presented in what works for many people, but there are other ways to explore it. And I felt that very strongly watching this piece as well, because there were moments where I actually couldn't wait to get off my seat just out of sheer excitement. But it was also times when I was absolutely still and so connected to the performers on stage. And I was just thinking, in the way that it's constructed, and of course in how you perform it as well, I'm wondering how you achieved that balance of vulnerability and empowerment. Because in the empowered sections as well, it's not like the vulnerability has gone missing. It's a very, very delicate balance that you actually don't get to see in many other pieces. And of course, one has to laud you for the courage and the bravery it takes to be able to put your personal stories out there. But effeminacy doesn't feel reductive in that manner either, because it's about things that are so much bigger than ourselves. And do you have personal journeys of being able to work through your vulnerabilities and craft that into the piece? I was wondering. Big question, no?
It's a great question.
I think we all have. Now it's just the question who is telling theirs. Like, I think really all of us, or let's say the 4 performers on stage and me, we have exchanged on it. The music was more commissioned by us. And the costume designer was also not with her personal journey involved in that sense. And Tommy wasn't. So, but the 5 of us definitely, and maybe even the outside eyes, have been through trajectories and shared theirs a little bit. But that's just a brief, that's general.
I think in most like work which is autobiographical, physical, in this way, the nature of the work, the theme of the work, will bring about a lot of sharing, at least in the rehearsal room, and a lot of visiting in your own life, in your own, like I remember the first time I saw Smiley Scars live, I think it took me 3 days to sort of regulate, because I was so kind of taken aback, moved, shocked, the fact that that happened to her. And so I'm sure we've all had moments like that, hearing each other's stories. Some things are very predictable, some things are very shocking and surprising. I think that marriage of vulnerability and strength that you're talking about, and I don't know, I have to take your word for it because I've never seen the piece from outside, is a craft thing. And I think that's the makers I would credit. In fact, we were talking about this yesterday in the car, that we get a lot of feedback saying this, that the nuance of how power and vulnerability exist together, and in fact maybe are the same thing in some ways. This is, I think, Marcel and Chris's lens and the craft of the director and the choreographer, that they've stitched together in a very, very intelligent and sensitive way.
But there's still the aspect of being the medium to surface it, which is then the take of the performers, I feel. So there's also, like, if you don't have bodies who are able to surface it, you cannot nuance it, right? So I was thinking of more also that we have all had like super profound and far-reaching, in terms of time, far back-reaching experiences with inequality or like patriarchy in that way. And that just what the situation which we had before with Anuj, where he said like he recognized as a 5-year-old certain things about patriarchy without even being familiar with the whole concept yet, but already recognizing what is not right. I think this recognizing of these things, we all had these experiences and we recognized each other in this. And these sharing these things, I think, is one of the strengths of that piece. It's what it is referring to in almost every minute. It is, I could dramaturgically, probably analytically tell you in each minute of the piece where we are criticizing patriarchy and in which way. And I think this was such a strong common experience. And that is really it can be strong, it can be fragile, it can be anything, but it is the thing we have centered and made shine in that. And it's a problematic thing, but it can also be a funny thing, or it can be without anger, like in Chris's solo, for instance. The whole story is told, but I feel completely without anger.
Yes.
A little bit of anger, no? When I say, with a man.
Yeah, that is a bit angry.
Anger.
But other than that, it's very much so. So it's, and sometimes with anger or sometimes with despair, like, but it is this thing, I think, which we centered around.
Yeah, and also I think, I feel this marriage of empowerment and vulnerability, but also humor and how it's woven together. And I think it comes from a real experience of sharing a lot of fun moments together, but also a lot of listening to each other and feeling empathy for one another, or recognizing each other, in the other stories, and also then sometimes feeling empowered by when someone then gets a platform and is able to also like put it out there and be angry or make a bold statement, and there's these moments where we are connected in this what's the line? I can't think of the line. This is my femininity, where actually I remember this came up in a residency in Infinite Souls, where we did this on a trampoline, and it was first with a lot of humor and fun, and then it was made into this statement that becomes very deep and loaded with meaning.
Yeah. That's actually a sentence. Remember, I was telling you, sometimes there's certain things I used to feel, oh my God, this line is so cheesy. But like now with like what's happening?
Which line?
This is my femininity. Oh, how dare you speak of vanity? That whole section, for me, I was like, I'm going to treat this as fun as a performer and do it, like super irreverent. That's how I could convince myself. But now it's so real because of, I feel like
Yeah.
we've actually moved 5 years. I mean, we've moved backwards in the world in terms of gender politics and stuff, and safety for women. Like, who would have thunk?
Who would have thunk?
But here we are.
Yes, when I come to this group, because they were very strong together, because they had a lot of work together, and it was a good team. And then it's for me to come later in. It was very easy then to make the light things, the technical things, because it was just I think a good together with all 5.
It's also, the piece has a beautiful transitions, as in like with some of the heavy solos, and where you also break with the there's this like entertaining dance or something, or and then there is a humor of that, where you also kind of play with the emotions of audience, and have also to give space to process and stuff and things. That's also where you where it works to balance the empowerment and vulnerabilities in the show. So
And there also the light is in the transitions, of
Yeah,
course, also
yeah.
quite crucial. Or this thing of like, when is it really bright and when is it really dark, or when is it? I mean, if we have even more space, then we also have the light on the ground also, which creates shadows like to both sides. And
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
or sometimes, or in Bangalore, we had the chance to make the light like as they walk in and out, to have the light also go like on and off.
Right at the
like-
beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, we had
Yeah.
it here also,
So-
but not so strong, because it was about all the black box we had all originally, and then in Bangalore we do not have this black box, so it was much.
फैल गया था वो
Yeah,
तो।
it was much better to see than this go in and out.
No, that's very interesting.
So also the light is actually changing from place to place, especially now in
Yes,
India.
I was actually going to get to that part, because gender itself is a huge topic, and starting somewhere is important. But I feel like we have insights on where you began with the work. But even in terms of the light design and the sound design, what was that process like? And what do you look for when you're lighting something that moves so quickly from happy to really not very happy?
You have to ask him actually,
Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
kind of quite let you make proposals, right? I mean, what is
Yes,
your process?
in the beginning, I did discuss with the most thing with Marcel, and then we talked about what we can do, and then we started in Bern to make the light design, and then I think the first is where to place the lights for sure, and then I think the most important thing is the programming with this. Here a few % more or less, and the times to change the light things. I think this is the most important things for me, because also in Bangalore we had only 9 lights or something like that, and I think it works also with that.
Yeah.
It's just and it needs. I think that the most is the programming, and in the end, yes.
Or maybe also remembering the original version, then from that adapting.
Yeah, from Switzerland, from the first versions to here. Yes, sure I know, because we had a lot of shows in Switzerland, so I know the piece very well.
Yeah. What's very funny with the music, actually, I'm still. It was totally lucky, I guess. The music was. Just the method of creating the music was so insanely profane for this piece, right? Because what we really did was like, for instance, the trio's dance where they do this, we call it skirts, like right after when she says, when you open your eyes, you will open them as a woman, where Chris is appearing in the dress the first time. And he looks here like he's a solo dancer, but he's constantly dancing with Smiley. It was actually two couples, like them are a couple and Chris and Smiley are a couple, but now it looks like Chris is soloing with his dress and the other two are doing a duet, but actually Chris is dancing with Smiley, but she's not there. He's also trying to dance with this white cloth, but it doesn't work. It's even more a solo because he gets to play with a prop or something. It's a bit like maybe one thing about the solo trio version, which we could also even work on more to find out what is further potential. But anyway, I'm ruminating. What was I gonna say? With the music, yeah. So that song where they do this thing about the skirts, what we call you open your eyes as a woman. That was a Laurie Anderson song.
Laurie Anderson.
And a kind of fairly famous Laurie Anderson song, and we just always worked with that song. And about 3 weeks before the performance, or 4 weeks before, we sent it to Thomas, or maybe 5, I don't know. We sent it to Thomas, the musician, whom we didn't have money to pay for all the weeks, so we had to give him a mandate. And we told him, write us a song in that style. So he would just do a song in that style. And Smiley's scar piece, which she generously donated for this show, was a Tarantino soundtrack song, something like, like kind of like bum, ba, bum, I don't know, a Western romantic song or something. And we also told him, just rewrite it, like, and same with the
Improv everything.
This wild choreography in the bold light. It's a fairly famous party song or something, and we just gave it to Thomas and said, these 3 tracks, we need something in that style, but not the original songs, because we don't want people to be busy with the history of that song. So we need something sound alike,
familiar.
So that's actually what we did. But having said that, like the profane method, Thomas is an extremely experienced and sensitive composer and musician, and he's just whatever he would do would be like sensed out, capillary style, like so yeah, it was lucky, but how it was done was actually quite blunt, right?
But I want to just go back to Chris dancing in his little black dress, which is lovely by its own, but I haven't seen the version with Smiley in it as well, but to me, it was an interesting take on it felt like an interesting take on the binary, because Chris is in black and he's playing with a piece of white cloth. It tied up very well to his story, so it didn't feel that disjointed at all. And if that helps at all in the reconstruction, I thought I would just share.
Of course.
And I've been, before I saw the piece, in the trailer, it starts off very strongly with the male gaze and the female gaze. That was my first interaction before I saw all of you in person. And we've had these discussions inside as well, when we're supposed to be working but are taking breaks. It can take a lifetime to undo the male gaze and start looking at things with, if not a female, then another kind of gaze that's not male. But I was wondering if you have anything to share about what your experience with the male gaze or the female gaze was before the production, and has that changed at all while you've been in your interactions with each other or with the production in general?
Ayo Rama. That is my experience.
Okay,
with
only
the
light
male
questions
gaze.
after this.
No, I'm kidding. Shili.
Well, I believe that we were all fighting to change the perception. We all had a same goal. The perception has changed. It has empowered much more than where we stood at that point of time. But for me, I've never seen in a male or female gaze or anything. I think for me, it was very much like a cosmic gaze. Like, you see, it was very spiritual. Like, it was very genderless. And I think one point of time, we also had this conversation where I was just telling Marcel, oh my God, this whole process of before the premiere of the show in Switzerland, I just feel like I want to be genderless. Like, why
I remember
is
so
why
well.
is that so much of binary system,
Hmm.
and how much it is affecting very negatively in each one of the human beings around the world, and it shouldn't exist. And that's why we also have a line like, gender is for freaks, right? It's like a hobby which is for freaks. Like, so the perception has become so, like, much broader, like beyond the binary cases that we are talking. Yeah, that is for my personal experience. Yeah.
I will try to be succinct, but my friends
Take your
know
time.
that that's not my biggest quality. So I think, like I've said this before, that this piece I was doing. So the excerpt of my solo called Red Dress Valley Ladki that you see was kind of born. That solo was born as a response to these constant keep occurring, and then they become something that is, it's like what I call it patriarchal penetration, in that you are carrying it. You wake up in the morning, you decide, where am I going, what should I wear, who's going to track my ride, blah 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 blah. So this minuscule constant ways in which it penetrates you. And so I had to do a lot of research and interviews, and this piece took me from 2014 to 2019, where I staged something throughout 90%, staged again throughout 90%, etc. There were two major things that happened in my life during this period that I think took me from just this cis, privileged, angry, vengeful feminist point of view to, I don't know what point of view, but not that. Slightly more, let's say, nuanced point of view or expansive point of view. And effeminacy was definitely one of them, where, and I keep saying that, had I attended a conference that Shilok had given, or a talk by Smiley, or a lecture demonstration by Chris or Marcel, we wouldn't have imbibed each other's experience in the kind of embodied way that we did, because rehearsal space is very intimate. I often find, like, when you rehearse with someone, it's even more intimate than a parent or a lover. I really do hold on to that a lot, and why I do what I do. So there was this other education that I think happened to me, and it really influenced how I kept chipping away at my solo eventually. The other thing that was that I did a work on touch and intimacy called Rorschach Touch, where I was really able to see as much as how it's so difficult to not hate men when this stuff happens. And then when you say, right, no, but these are the good guys, these are the allies. And then every few days, an ally will seriously let you down by they'll do, some joke they'll crack, by blah, 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 as we know. So it's quite hard to not hate men in that sense. But with Rorschach Touch, I was able to really experience men in their fragility. It was really a piece about touch. And in the workshop that I offer, one could see when you allow a man to nurture or rock another body, and then you bring the women become in power, and there's play and there's exploration, and you see men in their fragility, then it's a bit like, okay, I can't hate that creature, you know. Anyway, so that was where we were when we were performing it 5 years ago, all over where I was, where I had reached. In the next few years, what's happened to me is that I'm, like, I keep saying my dance training has been my warrior training in some way. Like, there's this hyper-femininity, there's also the martial art, and they've all marked different points of my life. Like, when I started training in Kalari, I started getting Eve teased less. I got out of some sticky situations, like jumping sideways through an auto, jamming somebody with a door, just because I had martial art training. And I always wondered, how would my sister do this, or how would the other women in my life who I worry about constantly do this. So anyway, that was one. This dance training as warrior training. But also, I think, so I'll end here, which is to say that this idea of the activist and the artist, and that's where I feel that in the beginning of my dance career, I remember really having this quandary, like, but why shouldn't I be in social impact? Because how can I take away funding from, say, ecology or AIDS, or, anything where someone's life is hanging for a dance piece that I want to make. How can this? And it's not such a simple answer, but what I've understood is that the artist can't always take on the burden of activism in the sense of dharna and fighting for rights. Because when we reduce the conversation constantly to give me my rights, let me vote, don't kill me in the womb, don't me, then wherever in the world as women and as non-males, one has been able to go to a place where you're talking about longing or desire or a spiritual connection beyond just survival, let me live. It's such a easy trick to pull it back down. Just one and that's it. Everyone's again just saying rape me. So someone has to hold space for consciousness as well. And I'm not saying it should be in an indulged way where we're like, let's just like be spiritual now in this like new agey way. But I mean that there is you have to keep an eye on that. We can't always be forced to say, please don't kill me.
Yeah.
Like, sorry for my language. But that's kind of where I am now. So that there is like we have to keep, the artist has to also fight for that, for the more nuances, for the consciousness, not just for the legislation and the rights and the policies. So that's kind of where I am now, and I'll end with saying like my where I am now is to say that I propose intimacy as a tool of resistance, and I try and practice that, and that's what I work with in a lot of my pieces, and this work has been a huge schooling, nourishing ground for that. And these people who I constantly come back to also to like ask, and like I would, I'm fantasizing about having both of these people be dramaturgs in two different pieces of mine, because then you build a trust and you want that intelligence back. Shilok, of course, constantly. We've worked together in many other capacities as well. So, yeah.
I'm not quite sure where we left off, but one thought I had, I will just say was like maybe, now I got it. Being together like that on tour for us also like detaching from our everyday life, which is also quite, of course, happening in patriarchy, and we all have our roles and we all have our families and, jobs to do within the family or within the social systems we are embedded in, and then coming out like that on a tour in other cities, in big cities, and having time with ourselves is also for us always very informative and like a opportunity for us to educate ourselves or to update our knowledge about the topic. And I feel this is also something, as it is always updated, but also when we produce a piece, this is probably the part of, and I'm also referring there to what you said, Diya, where this documentary dance work is coming or becoming evident, because we could also, as artists, and that's completely legitimate, we could also spend a lot of energy and thought into form. Like, how do we do this, or how do we get better at being this or doing this, or how could we explore the form more, make it more, invent more in terms of form, for instance, and leave all social aspects aside. It's possible, and it's also allowed to do that as artists. But I guess this is where exactly this documentary aspect becomes evident, that we are, as we are moving, as we're dancing, as we're warming up every day, as we are working on texts and trying to find out how does this all go together, we are investing into social topics, which then we also reference with a language where the social topics are recognizable, we hope. We had one showing in Zurich where I think you all remember how angry I was, and I still am when I think about it today, 7 years later, where there was a choreographer and lady about maybe 10 years older than I am. She would be maybe something like 55 now, who after the showing, and we presented that one moment when Diya and Chris, it was actually Smiley and Chris originally, stand melted together, and Shilok is looking at them, turning around and saying like some some see this with a male gaze, some see this with a female gaze, some see this with eyes which pray for the day when gender will be nothing but a hobby for some freaks. And this choreographer came after the showing, and as you know, like showing in the process is also very fragile, right? So there things are maybe criticized and they may be questioned by the whole team and it may be dropped or whatever. And this choreographer said, like, I don't need to hear that. I see that. I don't need to hear this with the male gaze and the female gaze. I know that, and everybody knows that, and everybody's thinking. And I was like, no, if we're not saying it, you don't think that. And much less will everybody think that when they see that. No. It's something you need to say so that people think that in sync at the same time. And yes, it's a dance piece, and I respect that you're a dancer and you want to see movement. That's wonderful. But just don't give that comment. But she also came from a time where language on stage was really like not a wish to have. It was the ambition to express everything with movement. And it was also, I think, a time where people said, like, yes, I can see, like, whatever you think, even if you think tree and I see curtain, it's still somehow a tree in the curtain. No, sorry, I'm getting... No. Anyway, it worked at that time. It worked for people. It was maybe some kind of fruitful generalizations, which were kind of also universal or cosmic and merging together, but not in our not in our kind of point we want to make. And and I think there's something specific about being an artist, or like about also maybe then engaging in this documentary aspect or where I just had a kind of a thought to what you said before. And for us, it's also like very fruitful to be, it is a luxury to go so deep into these thoughts and try and write texts about this, because I totally see that not everybody has the time or the privilege or the luxury to do this, because we have this for several wonderful reasons we can do that. But also we are going back to very hands-on situations where we are in the middle of these social things, and we have relatives who are like, like not like the contemporary artist in us would be wishing to be addressed, like what our parents tell us, what our children tell us, what our relatives tell us is, of course, that's hard work to deal with, or to maybe try and transform, or to try to engage with, or whatever. Not always, but can be. So we're, on the one hand, very privileged and have wonderful situations. On the other hand, we're also in the same situation as many others, or we are putting ourselves also into responsibilities where we try to react upon the things. We're also not trying to detach as artists and live somewhere quietly far away from all these things.
Ivory tower.
Yeah.
Okay, I had a thought that I wanted to share. It was something I felt very deeply while I was watching the piece. I really loved that everybody spoke in their mother tongue at some point, or in their first languages. I think it brought such a, for the lack of a better word, it was so raw, because that's what made it feel so real. It didn't matter that I wasn't able to understand so much of it, or because I think that also plays into the point of the piece very well. It doesn't have to be literal. You can pay attention in so many more ways. And it brought me back to my own experiences with language. I grew up speaking Bangla in my house, at home with my family, and I would speak Hindi outside in school or anywhere else that I was going. Hindi has 2 genders, if not 3, the masculine, the feminine, and Bangla has no gender. And I mean, I clocked that suddenly, and I'm going to spend the rest couple of days thinking, what has that done to me inside my brain? Because there's one language that has no gender, and then there's another that very strictly enforces that even inanimate objects in Hindi will have gender. So yeah, thank you for putting a very big and very exciting challenge for me for the next couple of days. If I have any breakthroughs, I will get back to you.
Yes.
So thank you for speaking in your own languages. That really meant a lot. And that brings me to another very exciting question that I've been dying to ask you. You've taken this piece to many places over the last couple of years, and I'm sure there's been different experiences in all of these places. But what differences do you find in the arts ecosystem where the piece was created and where it has traveled? Are there any things that are vastly different? And if there are gaps, are there ways in which you bridge those gaps, or what do you do?
Oh, that's. I think I'm not the right person to answer this because I feel I don't know yet enough about the arts ecosystem in India. I mean, I was impressed by that there are these residencies where we worked in both in Infinite Souls and in Adi Shakti, where but about how everything is funded and how it functions, I don't have enough insight actually.
So, answering to the question you asked, post Bangalore first premiere show that we had last week, post the show, I asked my friend, I was asking about the show. I mean, like he's a very close friend. I'm like, how was this? How was that? So I asked him, was it entertaining? Because in India, the most, like any art form, it has to be entertaining. And we grew up with all the Bollywood and the sandalwood, the music and the colors and stuff and things. And he said that, does it has to be entertaining? I think the art has to do this. This is what art's supposed to do. And I am glad you all are doing it. Of course, we have entertainment, but also the advocacy that we bring. And I believe that I always had this question in my mind. When we were touring in Europe, the way it was received was much more intellectual and and people were very serious about the conversation that we brought on the table. But I was always wondering how it will be taken here. And also this time we had a very diverse audience, not just the artist or the intellectual. So someone who also never seen something so experimental of dance documentary piece, which is also very biographical in nature. And it is well received. Not because I'm not saying because this is our show, but how people connect to it in their daily life as well. The kind of biases, the gender policing that they go through is being connected through all our biographical solo performances, or with all the dialogues that we speak together. And the way it has been received would be different, but what they want to receive, it's the same. So yeah.
Very interesting.
I have one addition, but one thing which is just funny, I try to make it short, is there's an aesthetic difference, almost historical in Europe, between all the Central European countries. Switzerland is actually starting. Switzerland's the very point. So you've got the Latin Europe, which would be Italy and France. Also a bit, I mean, it is clearly Spain, but Spain is aesthetically a bit more free. But generally, Italy and France, and also Greece maybe are and also Spain are would be the Latin Europe, and then you got the Germanic Europe and Scandinavian, which is up. And they have and this piece would definitely belong to the Germanic one, where it's more stark, more austere aesthetics, more a bit can be fragmented, and like maybe also with the light you kind of push like hard cuts, or like you whereas the Latin would also be much more built on also craft. So we in France we actually had some difficulty finding commercial gigs, or like kind of easy gigs, or pleasant gigs, because the show is not pleasant enough, and also because it's not well danced enough. So we didn't craft the dance enough. That's what we got as a feedback, so that people were kind of at that time not programming it, because they felt, well, we can't sell it as a dance piece because the dance is just not elaborated enough. And that was a very interesting feedback, just in terms of how culturally it is read, because it's a whole market which is lost, right? And now it's very interesting that Smiley's piece which we created last year also has a sort of emergency or survival mode, because Smiley couldn't attend any daily activities anymore as an asylum seeker. So we created a piece, even though it was difficult for her as an asylum seeker to do that in Switzerland, but we created a piece for her, and it went really well. And then now again we're going to France with that piece. And as a difference to effeminacy, we're actually going to specifically look at the whole piece and see where can we craft it a bit more Latin European, so just that the audience is, just to make sure the audience gets every joke, that we don't tell the joke in a Northern European way, but that we actually really conform or lean into more this other way of how humor works in Latin Europe, which I kind of know, and Smiley can perform it, but we're actually really reworking the whole show in that sense. And it's really interesting also with the curator, because the curator kind of wanted to buy a Northern European show. So the curator is also having a say in this, like how much we are actually allowed to do that. So it's a very interesting. I wonder if you'd have that in, I mean, of course we don't have the time to cater to every city, but I'd be even curious if there would be differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
I'm
sure.
also looking forward how it has also been received in Chennai, and also
Kolkata.
because it's also Smiley's place, and like, you know, I'm looking forward to it. And also in Calcutta, I mean, like, you know, for me in India, it has been an experience, because I don't know, I've always had this question in my head, like how this will be received here. Like, you know, like this is something which like at least in my circle they wouldn't have experienced this. So what is their perception, what is their gaze of this show? I have been really very happy with Bangalore and Delhi, so I'm looking forward with Chennai and also at the Cal, like what kind of the audience there who's going to come and how they're going to see this.
Godspeed.
Godspeed.
I have one promise, last but very important question to wrap up our time here together today. Where do you feel you're a woman?
Well, wow, I think I keep asking this question all the time in every show, but nobody asked me this question. But I still answer that question in the show. For me, currently at this point of time where I am in my life, I feel my woman in my rage very much. There is so much rage like in me, where like there's a point of time where I don't want to be a woman, like, you know, but still, like, you know, she exists there. Like, you know, and I want to like scream out the pain out there, like, you know, the kind of the injustice, the kind of the micromanagement that happens because of like you're a woman and you're like, you know, expected and you're told so much that you're a woman. And like there is, so I do feel her there.
What about you, Tommy?
I'm not sure, but I think maybe in my quiety, it's just, and I can't really say it, but I think it's something just Be so quiet.
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 Yeah.
That's such a nice way to put it because I don't feel very quiet at all. What about you?
I feel her, I think, in partially still in my body sometimes when I allow myself to feel maybe the qualities that I felt then as a young child when I wanted to be a girl and allowed myself to dress up, and I still feel that quality coming out sometimes, that more, feeling beautiful and soft and in the softness, I think, and in a kind of more maybe spiritual or soul level, also in a kind of sisterhood where I feel more often more connected to myself in the company of women or of female energies. Yeah.
I mean, it's a very emotional question because I think it keeps changing and it's so relative. So I experienced many times that in this group, I actually felt very masculine the entire time, and I think we were together without Tommy. It was this constellation and Smiley for many weeks, and I remember the moment where, and I was thinking, wow, I'm not used to feeling like this, but I was really feeling very masculine. Of course, anywhere I go with Shilok, I have to be like the security guard because some 3 followers will be there walking behind her. Then I'd be like, Shilok, let's go now. I become like this patriarchal boyfriend who's like, let's go, keep your eyes down, let's walk. Because I just don't want trouble. So there's it's such a spectrum. Like even the other day one of our friends was teasing us that there's that skirt scene after Shilok says her thing about close your eyes and where do you feel the woman, she did catwalks and moves back, and then when I come, so a friend is like, you look like some 15-year-old rowdy boy after Shilok, which is exactly how I feel. But yeah, I think I feel the woman in the sisterhood very much, and the masculine that I feel, it's like I'm quite resentful about it because I think that I've probably been very patriarchal with myself in that when I have to create and when I have to be in that space, I'll summon her. I'll summon this amniotic womb space and I'll get material out of her and she'll always give. And then when I have to function in the world and make my point and boom, 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 I'm like, shh, quiet. And I bring this man with the square shoulders and the colory spine and the like big chest, and I'm able to be like, hey, what is it like? And I'm and right now where I am is, I think I feel her in the old crone. I start to like some of the work I do is a lot with elderly, like people above 60, and I have a solo with about my grandmother, and I think I'm happiest in the company of much elder, like old people actually. And so that part of me is maybe where I feel her, like this old crone that I felt her since my early 20s even. And I think that's where I can play the sassy because I have dance training. I know how to do the eyes, the mudra, the whatever. But it's a performance. I'm ready to go into a cave now and be quiet. And I can still play the warrior because I've practiced her so much. But I'm the tired warrior now. Now I'm like, I want to sit in a cave. And so that's like in the quiet, in the night, under the moon, alone. So when I feel safe to be 100% woman in that sense.
Unfortunately, it's complicated because I really feel my woman in being loud and taking space and being vocal. And it's very interesting because when you look at me, you always think I'm taking space as a man. And it's also been a bit of a problem because as a kid, I always felt like I was also taking a lot of space. I was loud and so on, but I thought of myself as a girl. So I find it always very interesting also in cis female feminist spaces that my loudness is always seen as a cis gay man, whatever, loudness. But for me, it's clearly a woman's loudness. So for me, my woman is in my loudness and taking space, even though it's confusing.
That's lovely. Thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, I just wanted to share something. I also believe that in this journey with this show, I think most of the time in this team, I've felt more women because like very recently I've tried to become very masculine, and unconsciously it is just there, I think, as a survival mode. Because I was feeling very unsafe. At least the feminine in me was very unsafe to come out, and like because of the survival, like I've become a little very masculine in a certain way. But yesterday I was just thinking today in the morning, like I was in my very hyper feminine energy, like the whole like from the day till the night, and it heightened so much. And I didn't feel her for so long, and I think this team has always made me feel so safe, and the women just like the very hyper sassy women, like she just comes out to play around, like and it's so beautiful to experience her. So yeah.
That's really lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. And thank you for sitting down with us today. Thank you for...
Where do you feel your woman?
where do I feel my woman? I think I feel her in my shoulders a lot. It's a very physical feeling, especially when this is very woman to me. I'm also the eldest daughter in my house, and that may have something to do with the feeling of the woman in the shoulder. But I do, because when you asked me, not me, everybody in the audience, I actually remember thinking, I don't know where I feel her, and I should introspect. So I went back, I thought about it, and I've come up with my shoulders.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about everyone else?
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah.
I feel her in my soul many times. Also in my body, sometimes in my scars. I have a lot of scars on my arms.
I had like 10 days to think about this, but I still don't know. I think I feel her in many spaces. Recently, I realized I feel her in the hair.
Yeah.
But today, I realized I feel her in conversation and care.
Oh.
Because I feel like I have so many friends, even in the group, where there's just so much conversation and so much just like care for each other in very subtle ways. Like when Diya passes by me, she'll like touch my shoulder. That I feel like my woman is in that, in the sense of community and care, friendship.
Okay, youngest first.
Probably like around my chest. It's kind of nice.
Oh.
It's a nice feeling. I won't elaborate because it'll get too much.
I think I live in some sort of a dichotomy where I'm quite often like a person who burns bridges, but I'm like a sucker for bonhomie.
Yeah.
So I think what Medha was also saying, like in my understanding of compassion is where I find. I think that's probably the key. Maybe still trying to figure out.
Wow.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. This has been such a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for sacrificing your Monday to come chat with us. Thank you for bringing the show here into our space. Thank you also to Sandbox behind the scenes and Pro
Yes, thank you,
Helvetia for
Sandbox.
making this
Smiley.
possible.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Smiley.
Smiley, who's not here with us, and we're bummed about it, to say the least.
Thank you to Oddbird.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you to Oddbird.
Thank you,
It was a
For
Oddbird.
this amazing
pleasure
team.
having
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We loved being here. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
We loved having this team here, and if you missed the performance, your loss. But honestly,
Try to find the link online.
yes,
You
do
may-
try to find the link online. Try to
Yes.
watch it in real life if it's possible. And for more conversations like this, chats, tidbits, you can come back to our channel here. If you like this, let us know in the comments. And if you want more, subscribe, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.